It is really my privilege to introduce to you our presenter tonight. I met Rachel Gilmore many years ago, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago now in Virginia, at a presentation that she was making. She was planting a new church at the time called The Gathering, which is still vibrant and doing wonderful ministry. And a couple of years ago, she left that ministry and handed it over to a new leader so that she could work for Path One, which is the church planting arm of our denomination. And she was I had to ask her to say it again so I could write it down. She was the director of recruiting, assessing, and training for Path One. And one of the really creative, Rachel's extremely creative person, as you'll see. And one of the great things that she did while she was in that role is she created a podcast called Field Preachers Podcast and interviewed planters from all over the country and world, I guess, Rachel, right? And you can go back and listen to those. She's handed that ministry off now to Beth Eastock, who's doing a great job as she continues that forward. Just not very long ago, Rachel left that position at Path One. She was recruited to plant a new faith community in Phoenix, and that's where she and her husband live now. Her husband is the senior pastor there, and she was hired at the church as their missional consultant. And that's her title, but what she's doing every day is she planning a new kind of a church within a church, second congregation that is mostly about 90% online, maybe 95%. They're going to have one kind of in-person gathering, large group gathering a month. That's the plan right now. But she's gathering a lot of new people right now, as she's just a few months into that project. But Rachel, it's really good to have you here tonight. Thank you for making the time to join us and share with us some of your wisdom.
So much. I'm excited to be here and to spend time with you. And it's only 4 o'clock here, so if I have tons of energy, trust me, I'll be, more mellow and drinking my cup of tea in a few hours, just like all of you. So, so thank you, Dave. Are you ready for me to just dive right in?
Yeah, I'm going to just offer just a transitional sentence here. So we have been talking for the last couple of weeks about, where are they now? And what we're referring to are the people that are outside the church. Where are the people in the community, in our cities, in our communities that are not in the church? What are they dealing with? What is life like for them? And how might we find new ways of relating to those people? And those of you that were here will remember that Luke talked about a possible approach to connecting with lonely people by planting fresh expressions, new faith communities. That's what his book is about. And last week we thought a lot with Paul about how to connect with people online more effectively, and it was a great presentation he gave. Rachel, tell us what you're going to talk about tonight. We've asked her to talk about how do we connect with and gather with people, and where might we gather people as we move forward, as we try to reach them. So, Rachel, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you. Let me share my screen here. Yay, and move all your lovely faces. Okay, so I can present. So yes, I watched Luke and Paul's presentations. They have so much to offer. There was so much wisdom. It was just really rich material. So I'm going to kind of build upon the great foundation that they've laid and look at what will bring us together. And it's kind of an uncertain season, right? It feels like we're kind of skydiving. We're jumping out into the unknown. We're not quite sure what's going to happen. We were talking before we hit record about the reality of COVID and how no one is necessarily safe from this global pandemic. And it really is impacting us, all generations, young to old. So I'm going to hopefully lay out some strategies for how we as people in the church can live into the quote. One of my favorite quotes from William Temple is, "The church is the only institution that exists for the benefit of those who are not yet members." And so how can we do that? How can we embrace and reach new people in new ways? Should it be in person? Should it be digital? I have tons of content, but I love to be interrupted. So if you have a question or want some clarification or want to push back, so I'm Italian, I don't mind confrontation, let me have it. Just unmute yourself, dive in, let's engage, or throw it there in the chat. So I wanted to start off by talking about the major paradigm shifts that the church made during COVID that are here to stay, my friends. So many of us are like, oh, when the pandemic's finally over, I can't wait to never use Zoom ever again. Well, I'm sorry, okay? Online worship with an emphasis on engaging people, like Paul talked about, getting them to chat and to fill out that connection card, that is here to stay. Forever and ever and ever, it will be a part of the church universal. Online discipleship with a variety of platforms is here to stay. It may not always be Facebook or Meta or whatever it's going to be called. It might be Discord or Twitch, but online discipleship using a variety of different platforms, different companies or apps or tools is here to stay. Online third spaces for outreach and connection, that's here to stay with us as well. Luke mentioned these third spaces are places outside of home and work and school where people gather. And those used to be, CrossFit or the park or a local restaurant. But now we have all of these online third spaces where people are meeting up on Facebook groups or on house party apps or whatever it might be. And that's here to stay. If you are not able to reach or engage with people online, you're missing out, because now more than ever, folks are going there to make connections as they're feeling lonely. Hybrid worship done well is here to stay with us. If it's not done well, it might go away, right? So I have some examples of really small churches with limited budgets that are doing great hybrid worship, and it's doubled or tripled the size of their faith community. Hybrid worship is here to stay. Moving beyond the walls and beyond a Sunday morning rhythm is here to stay with us too. All of us celebrated, right? In April of last year, when the pandemic and lockdown first happened and we saw our online worship attendance skyrocketing through the roof, and we're like, oh my goodness, everybody's coming back to church. And now that is not the case for most of us, right? They are not engaging online live on Sunday morning. They're watching Monday or Wednesday or Friday or every other Tuesday. So what we're learning is that people want a different rhythm. And it connects with the loneliness discussion that Luke had with us, that people, when they're feeling lonely, are now saying, wow, how can I connect in some way? What's my church doing? Or what's a church doing? Or I saw this worship service and they talked about a Bible study. So how can I access that? What's this Everyday Sanctuary app? I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling depressed. I'm going to go to this app as a way of meditating and reconnecting to myself. So people want to move beyond the walls of in-person worship in a church building and beyond that Sunday morning rhythm. And it's kind of a good thing, right? Where people want faith to be a more regular daily practice as opposed to an hour on Sunday morning. Another paradigm shift that we saw was empowering laity to lead. And this happened kind of out of necessity. A lot of clergy were overwhelmed and exhausted and done. If you didn't have a team to help you during that first year of lockdown, come up with all your online content and in-person content, you're exhausted. You're on sabbatical, right? I mean, I don't know about the New York conference, but I'm from the Virginia conference, and we had the highest number ever of young clergy under 40 just going on voluntary leave because they needed it for self-care purposes, to take care of their family, to navigate these uncertainties. We're seeing, the great resignation, where more people now than ever are just leaving their jobs. And so how do we empower lay people to step up, to lead in the church, to lead these faith communities, to lead these fresh expressions that are reaching people in new and innovative ways, so that it's not all pastor-centric? We are not the hub of the wheel. God is the hub of the wheel. And the scariest part is saying, wow, if I don't carry all of this, it won't collapse if it's built on God, right? God will find a way to continue to reach people. I need to make sure I have a team-based mentality in all I do when it comes to ministry, or we just won't make it. We can't. It's too much for any one person. All right, so this was talked about by both Luke and Paul, but I thought I'd reference it again and go a little bit deeper. A great term of lurkers came up in his session, where there are people that are watching, but they're not engaging, or there are people that maybe were super engaged, and online every week when you first launched online worship. And now you're like, dude, Joe, like, where are you? I haven't seen you in like 4 or 5 months, right? And here are some of the reasons that researchers are saying that it's happening. One is because of screen fatigue or life fatigue, right? We had a bandwidth in March or April, but now it's been like 18 months of this, and people are like, I cannot for the life of me sit down for another hour in front of my computer, so I just won't do it. So they're lurking because they only come out when they have the bandwidth for it. A lot of folks are lurking because they're anxious, or they're depressed, or they're stressed, and they don't want to be fully seen. That's a benefit of online ministry, right? You could be an avatar, or turn off your video and audio. It kind of freaks us out though a little bit, right? Can we be honest that if someone like phones into a Zoom call and you don't see them and they don't say anything, you're like, is there a person there? Is it a robot? Am I about to get Zoom bombed, right? So we haven't fully figured that out, but some folks are just too anxious, depressed, or stressed out to engage fully the way we'd like them to. Others are lurking because they don't know what kind of community they need. They're just so tired, or, you're a young family and you're like, I know I need people right now, but I'm scared to death that my kid's going to get COVID, or that they'll pass it on to someone else and I won't know it. And so I don't know what community should look like for me right now. I don't know how engaged to become. I don't know what's safe and what's paranoia. And everybody is at a different place on that continuum of caution, right? So it's really, really hard. Other folks are lurking and not fully engaging because they just don't know how to engage. This is true for all generations, but some of our older boomers and beyond who have adapted and embraced online stuff so well are still like, wait, what's a Facebook group and a Facebook page? And why do I have to go to YouTube to watch this? And so they don't really know how to engage online, or they want to show up in person the way it was done. But if new people come, they don't always know how to engage those new people, right? And have a connection and a relationship with them. Our younger generations, for sure, are not quite sure how to move from, these are like some technical terms, right, guys? But you can Google it. It's fun. It's fascinating. How to move from parasocial relationships online, where they watch you as the pastor or as the layperson as more of like a TV star, like it's a TV show and they watch it. And so they're separate from it, parasocial, parallel to you. They don't know how to move from that to something that's what we call transsocial, where you're direct messaging them and they're like, oh my gosh, like Rachel's a live person and she knows who I am. She knows me as Dave, and I'm able to communicate in person as well. So they just literally haven't learned that because they're digital natives and they haven't had to foster relationships online as much as they have in years past. And then online church is new to so many of us that we were all in at first, but now we're like, is this really the way it's going to be? And is it always going to be like this? Because for a lot of us in the church, we found a rhythm that worked. We found our tech person, we figured out the lighting. And so we just have followed the same order of worship, the same 45-minute to 1 hour service for the last 18 months. And people are wanting something different. And for many reasons, we may not be able to produce that or provide that right now for them. Or they would rather just be in person. And so they're not gathering online because, by golly, they're vaccinated and they want to get out and they're not afraid of breakthrough cases. And so they want to just show up at the fish fry and they don't want to eat fish on Zoom with you. So they just won't do it. So, all right. So what can we expect in the future? Okay, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to pick one of the first 4 options and possibly add in the bonus option number 5, okay? So option number 1 is what we're seeing nationally. Most of our churches with under 75 people on a Sunday that tend to be retired folks or older, they are like option 1, gung-ho all the way, ride or die, okay? Which is, we met in person before COVID, and we're going to go back to in-person only worship. That's it. We just want to go back to the way things were. We hate technology. We can't wait to get rid of hybrid live stream, blah, 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 Zoom Bible studies. Just give me my UMW circle and my cup of coffee in the fellowship hall. That's what I want. And I'm not judging anyone for doing this, right? Because actually, for small churches that are aging, who have gone back to in-person worship, they have had the highest return. Up to 90% of their folks are coming back in person. So you're like, what? This is what we want. You know, almost everybody has come back here. The trick is that according to Barna research, 60% and more of Gen Z, millennials, and Gen X have said they will never go back to every Sunday worship again, period. So if you're going to do that, it's okay. Just do it knowing that your church will not exist in 10 years, or maybe 15, maybe 20. I don't know, it depends on how big your endowment is, right? And where you're located. But this is not a plan if you want a church to be there in another 20 to 30 years. It's a plan to maintain the happiness of your current congregation, but it will not reach new people. Option 2, we only met in person before COVID, but we've moved to in-person and online worship, and we'll continue both types of gathering. So you're going to try to keep it up and do both, and that's great. It's exhausting, right? So we need a team together. The trick is that if your online worship isn't engaging, you know, and people aren't actually commenting, and you're not a church of the resurrection with 5,000 people and millions of dollars to spend on your online ministry, it's going to be hard to maintain your lurkers. You need to get them to be engaged in the community and feel connected to make your online presence viable in the future as well. Which is why some people, and I can't fault them, are like, I just don't want to keep doing it because it's just too hard and I don't have the resources that others do. And this is where I'll just throw out one like quick suggestion. We are a connectional church. So I'm launching all these online things, and I'm working with other planters, Methodist pastors all over the US, and saying, hey, I'll do week 1, you do week 2, you do week 3, so that I don't have to do it all because we're in this together, right? So if I don't have the resources in my new church plant, maybe you don't either, but together we can do really incredible things. So ponder that if you're considering option 2. Option 3 is we met in person and online before COVID, and we'll continue to grow and explore best practices to maintain both communities. So a lot of mid-sized to larger churches already had online worship before COVID, and so they didn't see their numbers grow as much with online church because a lot of their folks were already committed. But they did a research study that came out 2 months ago that Lifeway and Outreach Magazine were a part of, and they found that 50% of United Methodists and Wesleyans are still worshiping online only and plan to stay that way. So if you're in option 3 and you had a strong online worship before and you offer that afterwards and continue to innovate and add new things and adapt, there's really great potential for you to reach lots of folks now and into the future. Option 4 will be online only and continue to do so. A lot of church plants that launched during COVID, Abigail's a rock star here, that's an example. You have to pivot, like I'll do something online, right? And there are no plans to make it an in-person gathering. There are some church plants that moved to online worship and will never go back to in-person gatherings because it saves them so much money and they're able to reach so many more people by just staying online and having people gather in small groups in their local context, wherever they might be in the US or in the world. And then option 5, you can add this into any of your other options, 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's we're equipping our laity to lead small groups and fresh expressions for a team-based approach to the kingdom. So this is what Luke's book is about, right? And how do we train and equip folks to go out and be the church and disciple folks? And with General Conference coming, just to make us more anxious, if we're not already anxious enough, I promise there's good news coming. But whenever General Conference happens, COVID permitting, there are a lot of churches that are like, gosh, you know, what is the future here? And annual conferences are already training lay people who are ready to step up and serve a small church of 7 or 8 if they can't imagine having a pastor that can be there. And yet these folks have been worshiping together in the small Methodist church for 80 years and they want to continue to meet. So now they're stepping up and saying, well, I'll lead it. Let's make this happen. Let's go back to a class meeting and I can facilitate that. So let's empower and equip our laity. We saw that our denomination began its decline in the 1800s when we professionalized clergy. We stopped having them run a circuit. We stopped empowering the laity to take care of each other and the faith community while the circuit rider was on the road. That's the moment of our decline, where we said, well, you're the pastor, you do it all. Well, aren't you the worship leader? Why aren't you growing the church? It's not my job. I'm here to come and sit in the pew on Sunday. Well, the Great Commission said, as you are going wherever you go, make disciples. And it wasn't only pastors that Jesus was talking to, right? So how do we reclaim that and see the gifts and the grace that abounds in the lives of Our Lady, and really feed that, nurture that, equip and enable those folks? So I'm going to check the chat here. I'm seeing some stuff. Yay. Okay. So millennial, Gen Z, Gen X, 60% of Gen Z. And then I think Gen Z and Gen X and millennial, 60% will not go back to weekly in-person worship anymore. That's what they indicated as their preference. When you come to Gen Z, your younger generation, it's about 65%. So yeah, it's something to be prepared for, right? And what is like just been mind-blowing for so many pastors is our bread and butter in the church for so many years was young families. You get young families and you can do anything. Well, young families are the least likely to be in in-person worship right now. And so what do you do when you have, your older retired folks and like your young 20-somethings and your families are gone until there's a pediatric vaccine, which this week, right, it might change things, but you have the 0 to 5 to worry about as well. So, and once they worship online for a few years, are they going to want to go back every Sunday and try to get the kids up and ready on a Sunday morning at 7 a.m.? No, they're not. So, oh my goodness. Alrighty. So how do you decide as a pastor or a layperson that's a leader in your church if you should be gathering in person or online? There are 4 kind of general criteria you can look at. Number 1 is what's safe in your area per CDC or your annual conference guidelines. Are you at a transmission rate of 10% or above? Well, then consider staying online for a while. Where are you engaging people in ways that are steady and growing, even if it's incremental? Like if you have been pouring your heart and soul into online stuff for 6 months and all you see is a decline week after week after week, maybe you need to consider some in-person socially distanced things, or totally revamp what you're doing online. A lot of times we're like, well, I'm offering it, that's enough. But people will tell you by showing up in person or online what is meeting their needs of loneliness and exhaustion right now. And so pay attention to that. And if you are not a big data nerd, then find someone in your church who is. There is someone in your church who would love to, whoever's taking your attendance on Sunday, have them look at the number of likes. We'll get to that later about how to shape this team so you know where you're most effective in growing. And even if on like Facebook or Instagram, you're growing by like 0.5%, that's the goal for businesses. Okay, so it doesn't have to be astronomical, just slow and steady incremental growth. Look at the kind of team you have around you. If you are a pastor who's doing it all and you're the only like paid staff person at your church, my gosh, like find and equip that team, those lay people, and start with like 3 people and meet with them every single week and ask them the same 3 questions. Question 1 is, what was your main takeaway from worship on Sunday? Like, what did you feel God was saying to you in that? Question number 2 is, why do you feel God was saying that to you? Like, what's God's message for you in that? And question 3 is, what are you going to do about it in the next 24 to 48 hours? So you help people understand God is talking to them as well. God is calling them to engage and serve in some way, and that they can be faithful and obedient to that. You do that rhythm with 3 people from your community or your church for 3 to 6 months. You build up that team and then you deploy them, and that will help you do more online stuff. So those 3 questions are not mine. Those I stole from Ralph Moore, who's a Foursquare church planter. He's like in his 70s now, but there are over 2,500 churches in the world that attribute their existence to those 3 questions, because he mentored someone who mentored someone who mentored someone who led them to Christ. So, and then you also want to look at your funding. What does your funding look like? If you have resources and finances, hire additional staff to help, or purchase gear or equipment that can help you have a stronger online presence, right? And be more engaging online. And if you don't have funding like that, think through what are ways that we can increase that funding, that we can help, reinvigorate or energize our ministry.
Rachel, can you repeat those 3 questions again?
Yeah, question number 1 is, what was your main takeaway from Sunday worship? What did what stuck out to you about the sermon or music or whatever. And then number 2 is, why do you think that's what you're holding on to? Like, why did that stick out to you? You know, what might God be saying to you because that scripture verse is still reverberating in your head? And then question 3 is, what are you going to do about it? You know, something stuck out to you. Do you feel like God might be talking to you? So how are you going to respond? So yeah, those are your 3 questions. What kind of gatherings bring meaning to communities? People really want gatherings that feel intentional, not like you're just throwing something together and, you know, just turning on your Zoom camera and trying to figure out what kind of prayer you're going to lead at 7 a.m. on Facebook. They want it to feel intentional. Priya Parker has a really great book out called The Art of Gathering that talks about, even with virtual stuff, like how to set up your backdrop on Zoom or have ways to engage people or rules of etiquette to offer ahead of time. So folks feel like you have thought of them before you've invited them to gather. They want things that are relational. They want to not feel so alone and so isolated and still in lockdown. They want to connect with someone. They want gatherings to be reflective. Not everybody, but about half of your folks will really want to reflect and ponder and journal and meditate. And so if you can guide them through that, you can Google the work of Calhoun and on post-traumatic growth. So we always hear about post-traumatic stress, but some people can come out of these experiences even stronger and more resilient and adaptive. And reflecting on your experience and using narrative and journaling is a huge part of that. So offer that in your community. They want it to be fun. You know, after the Spanish flu, we had the roaring 20s, because I guarantee you when we're all vaccinated and it's safe and there's no more variants, we will want to party. I mean, maybe not with millions of people, but we will want to celebrate and like have mask burning ceremonies. So try to embrace fun when and where and how you can, because so many of us want to be there right now and we're not. And it's so hard. So celebrate together. They want it to be service oriented. So another part of post-traumatic growth is giving people a chance to serve others, because if they can and they can make a difference, it helps to minimize how helpless and powerless they feel with COVID. They want it to be forward facing, like let's cast a vision for the future. I need to know what's next. That can get me through the funk I'm in right now. And the fact that that my loved one was exposed to COVID and I'm anxious, I need to have something to put my hope in that's coming my way. And then people really like things that are affinity based. I mean, we're trying to be more inclusive, diverse, hear and connect with other people. But if you have a few families and you can get them together and they can all talk about how hard and impossible the last 2 years has been, that will be really meaningful for them. They're more likely to show up. Okay, so this is, oh my gosh, okay, I might spend the rest of my time on here, although I have probably 8,000 more slides. So here's a fun activity to do to help you figure out how to gather and meet new people in new places. Okay, so what you do is you take sticky notes with your church council or whoever you want, from whoever your team is, whoever your people are who are excited about reaching new folks. And you write every activity that you do in the life of the church, anything on the calendar, from choir practice to UMW, to the food pantry, to the rummage sale, everything goes on a sticky note. And then you draw, put up a big whiteboard piece of paper and draw your horizontal and vertical lines. And when you look horizontally, you have transactional activities here where people come to receive something, gifts or clothing or food or fish or junk or blessings for their animals. And on the other side is relational stuff where people come like to be seen, to connect, to love and to engage. And then when you look vertically, you have activities where you're the guest, and you know that you're the guest at this event if the church or the church members do not determine the day, time, or location of the event. And you're the host if you're determining the day, time, and location of the event. And then you just put all your sticky notes everywhere, right? My hunch, and I can't see the future, but if I was a betting, gambling person, which is a Methodist I can't be, I would bet a lot of money, like maybe my whole pension, that the majority of your sticky notes are going to be hanging out right here. They're going to be transactional and hosting. You might have a few relational things, right? UMM, UMW, choir, prayer group, but we do a lot of transactional stuff where we just want to serve and give. We want to make meals for people. And then we love being the host of everything, right? Come to the church, at the church, in the sanctuary, in the fellowship hall, on our back lot, come to us. We'll put up a sign. Guess what? You put up a sign and invite people to your church, no one is going to come. Over 90% of people who come to a church for the first time do not come because of a sign. They come because they were invited by someone they know. So if you're not invitational, if you're not relational, you're not going to get there. Problem is, most of the folks in our churches don't know anyone outside of the church. So they have nobody to invite because they come to the church so they can have their networking community, and everybody else is like scary, maybe not Jesus-y. And we wonder why our churches are in decline. It's because we've stopped loving our neighbor as ourselves, right? Sorry, I'm preaching now. I'm going to present, I'm going to shift and talk about how we can differentiate here. So, you might have a blessing of the animals at your church. That's great. But you know what? I lived in an apartment for 6 months in downtown Phoenix, and I met more people at the dog park on the first floor of our apartment than I did anywhere else. And we connected over our shared love of our dogs. And we would talk about who our vet was and what groomer to stay away from. And I kid you not, there's one girl that I met. She was like 23, I'm like way older than that. And single girl living there with her brand new puppy. And we talked about her puppy and my puppy, and we had puppy play dates. And our third time meeting at the dog park, she's like, so what do you do? And I was like, well, I'm a pastor. And she's like, I've never thought about church. And you're a woman, like, you want to tell me that? You want to tell me like why you're a pastor? Share, like, I got to share my call story with a 23-year-old girl who at the end was like, so can I come to church on Sunday? And I said, no, please don't. I just got there. Like, I don't, just give me your email and you can come to all these online things I'm doing and we'll gather in person in this new way. Because again, I love the established church that we're planting out of, but it's about 50 people in their 70s and they're, opening worship music is Barry Manilow. And while that works for them, it would not work for this 23-year-old Latina girl. So like, not going to happen. So anyways, so that's how you make that shift, right? So I was the guest. I didn't set the day and time. I wasn't like, hey, let's meet at 5 every night. That's creepy. That's stalkerish. Be nice, be normal. That's the key to this. But when I ran into her, I'd be like, oh gosh, it's so great to see you. How are you doing? How's Roxy? And then you can compare, like, you have United Methodist men, United Methodist women. That's great. But what if you also had a square dancing hobby? This happened at a church in Arkansas where I did a fresh expressions training and someone's like, I've been square dancing with the same people for 15 years and I really know and love them. You think I could offer to pray with them one time at the end of square dancing? I'm like, yes. And she did that. And then they wanted to start gathering for a meal and then a Bible study. And now she's leading a fresh expression because she loves to square dance and she loves these people and she loves Jesus. And that's how we combine these things, right? Or join your library book club, get to know people there. Again, you're the guest, you're going into this space. Instead of choir practice, and choir practice is great, but join a neighborhood Facebook group and invite, or a musical group. In Arizona, there's like this whole Facebook group for worship leaders. So I'm thinking about organizing a virtual choir, like all of you contribute and sing, let's make music together online. There's interest with that, right? Instead of just selling pumpkins, trees, flowers, things like that, shift it and make it more relational. So our church is located right in central Phoenix. And so a neighborhood association said, hey, we're doing a fascinating finds of Phoenix event. Could we have people come and look at your sanctuary? Because it's like really big and old. And I was like, absolutely, come look at our old church. But guess what? Because we're so excited you're coming, we're going to have all these free activities for kids that are outside in our courtyard that are socially distanced, chalk drawing and rock painting. And we're going to have a whole pet station because I know y'all love your pets and your dogs at the dog park. And we're going to do a selfie station with you and your pets. And we're going to have local university students playing classical music in our sanctuary. So it sounds really amazing too. And they're like, oh my gosh. And now we're expecting 1,000 people to be at our church next Saturday. And so we weren't really the guests for it. That's why I put it on this line, because we didn't determine when it was happening. They told us and they said, we want it at your church, but I've made it not a transaction, come and get a stamp on your fascinating finds thing, but more relational. So think about where people are gathering, where those third places are in your community, and how you can leave your church, go and be a guest, and focus maybe on transaction, but heavily on relationships to connect with people as a way of growing. So this is like how I'm meeting all kinds of crazy people. And I signed up to be a volunteer chaplain with the state police. And that's been an experience, and getting my bulletproof vest and everything else. But they call, and I have a radio, and I do ride-alongs, and I get to learn about the needs of the community and the needs of these officers. And it's helping me be more mindful of the ministry that's needed in the community, and just kind of go along where people are. So my main job is doing like next of kin notifications or helping after a shooting. But in trauma, like, I'm able to be there and to love and serve, and it's an honor, right? And in Phoenix, which is like the 5th largest city in the US, there are only 5 of us to help. So it's crazy, but this is a way to serve and give and love. So questions about this at all? Or pushback? It's so fun. I'm going to throw one more example, sorry, and then I'll take all your questions. I lied to you just now. So if you are a mom, the thing I just keep raving about is the Peanut app. If you live even in a rural place, it might be helpful. So Peanut is an app. It's like Tinder for moms. So you make your own profile of like, my kids are vaccinated and my kids play video games and they are 10 and 12. And it will give you all these pictures of other moms who have kids your same age. And you can swipe up if you think they sound cool, and swipe down if you're like, not today, Satan. Anyways, but then you'll wave at each other and it'll connect you to them. And let me tell you, like, I waved at this woman named Alicia, who was like, hey, want to get coffee with me and my friends on the first day of school? And I was like, sure, Alicia. So I showed up to coffee with her and 4 of her friends. Alicia is actually on the school board. So she and I hang out every 2 weeks now. This woman has never been in a church, has no intention, but she's showing up at my Midtown Meet event, right? And she shows up to hang out and walk in the park with me. And she introduced me to her friend, Nikki, who runs a nonprofit and is Church of God in Christ, raised, but has not been to church in ages. She and her mom and her daughter all showed up at church last weekend, and she wants to talk with me about partnering together with her nonprofit that helps families experiencing homelessness. Like, I am reaching all these people and getting all these contacts because of this app. So use digital online third spaces. And maybe you meet in person, maybe it just stays online, which it has with some of these other moms I'm connecting to, but it's just a great way to be the church. Okay, now I'll take questions.
So I just need to say, this is Dave talking again. I just need to say that this tool, this page that Rachel has put up here, is one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen created for churches, because we have been part of the training we do for church planters is to think about the difference between a tractional church, where, like Rachel was saying, everything down at the bottom, we create some kind of a gathering and we invite the community to come, put up a sign, have a Facebook page, have a website, and we wait for people to come to us. That's a tractional church. It's American church. That's the way it's been for forever in America. Versus missional church, which is this thing at the top that Rachel's talking about all across the top. We don't determine the place or the time or the activity. Those things are already happening, and we show up. We bring Jesus to where people are just to build relationships with them. And so if I had my way, which I clearly don't, every church in Upper New York Conference their leadership team would take time with this document that Rachel has created with one of our colleagues. And I just think it's brilliant. And I want to make sure that everybody on the call understands it. Does anybody have any question about what's going on here that you want to ask Rachel?
No. Okay, so a general question I do get is, as a church, if I want to grow and reach people, how much time should I spend up here versus down here? And I have a book. It's not as intense. Luke had more time to write during COVID. I did not. So mine's like a super short, like 90-page book on fresh expressions. I call them missional communities because, like Dave said, it's about going out in mission to that community and reaching people. But in that book, I talk about the 60-40 rule. So spend about 60% of your time hanging out up here and only 40% of your time as a pastor or lay people doing this. And if you go to an event in the community, like if you're a square dancer, do not, please, for the love of all that is good and true and holy, do not bring your entire UMW circle to square dancing thinking, oh gosh, now if there's 20 of us and only 5 others, we'll take them over, because they will just freak out and feel overwhelmed and attacked. So the 60-40 rule applies to that as well. So if you're going to a book club, make sure that you are not bringing too many people with you, that you're still only 40%. Or if you're hosting something at your house, like I host dinner parties and I make sure 60% of folks have never been to a church and maybe don't even realize I'm a pastor, and 40% are connected to my launch team, so that it's not like, oh my gosh, they're a cult and they're trying to like make me drink Kool-Aid. Okay, you don't want to freak people out. So 60-40 is a good rule for that. And just to throw out credit where credit's due, I did develop this, but with Matt Temple, who's the associate church developer in North Texas and pastors a church in Chicago actually. So he's like phenomenal and brilliant. So we collaborated on this, and it's been so much fun to do with churches, right? Okay, well.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So if I was doing this with my church and we were putting our sticky notes up, most of the stuff on the top half would be individual things that individuals are doing, right? Or am I reading that wrong?
Yes, it could be. I mean, with this, it's because I'm like 3 months into planting, right? So I don't have teams yet. But what it looks like to have groups in this guesting space up here is to say, we're going to get 6 to 10 adults from our church to volunteer at our partner elementary school. Instead of just bringing them donuts on the first day of school, we're going to encourage our church members to go into the school and to read to kindergartners and to serve and connect in that way and to form relationships. So they're the guests where they're going out into that community. And then they come back and they share about the needs of education. And then maybe you organize a drive for backpack buddies for food or for school supplies. But instead of having people come to the church to get it, you go back out to the school when they do their carnival day or their fair day or their musical performance, and you offer them in prepackaged, COVID safe bags for folks to take with them as a thank you. So it's a way to be relational, a little bit transactional, but to do the guesting stuff up top. Or if there's, a clean up the park day, or if there's, my gosh, a protest, right, going on, and you gather people from your church to all show up together with signs of love. I brought 7 people from my church plant in Virginia Beach to the white supremacy riots in Charlottesville. And we stood there with signs and we escorted BIPOC folks safely from one part of town to another. And so that was our ministry, to be relational and to be the guest. So there are ways to do it as well with groups, and challenge your lay folks to think through that and to say, gosh, what do I do? And what could I be doing more of?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so what are the top 5 do's and don'ts for gathering people during the season? As I kind of mentioned before, do prepare the space ahead of time, make it feel intentional and special and unique. Do think about the best platform for your audience. So like if you love Facebook, like I'm like the oldest millennial there is. So I'm way more into Facebook than Instagram because I used it for longer before Instagram was a thing. But I'm working with a lot of Arizona State University students. So I'm having to do primers on Instagram, and I'm on TikTok, right? And with followers and all that kind of stuff, because that's the platform they want. I can't just say, oh, look, I put my sign up on Facebook, everybody will come there. No, again, you have to go out. Where are they? What are they using? What are they interested in? Do track engagement to discern next steps. Is it working? Is it resonating with people? Do not lose hope. We're exhausted and it's overwhelming and everything is uncertain and we just want to curl up in the fetal position for another 6 months until the world is safe. But like, we've got each other. We have the living Christ inside of us. Take care of yourself, take Sabbath, set boundaries, say no, but also hold on to hope that this too shall pass. It will get easier and maybe we'll be even stronger. This might be an opportunity for the church to die in many ways, so that we can truly live out the resurrection and reach post-Christian communities. And then don't forget the importance of authenticity. So I will not start a square dancing fresh expression because I've never square danced in my life, and they will know I'm there to kind of manipulate or coerce them to the cross. And that is, no one wins in those situations. Okay, so be authentic to who you are and what your interests are. And when you're on social media, be authentic too. Like, don't try to be all cool. Like, I'm not going to try to use words that my 12-year-old is using, because every time I do, he turns red and is like, cringe, right? So like, they can tell when that's normal language or not. So be true to yourself, and you're cool. So a lot of us, again, the mindset back in the heyday of Tractional Model Church was, our church is dying. Let's get a drum set and an electric guitar and everyone will come back. Well, if that's not who you are and you're playing as the deer with a drum set, like, it's not going to bring people back. Okay. Like, honestly, my twin sister is Episcopalian and she loves singing and organ and piano music, and she looks for churches that are traditional. So you don't have to be a cool band to get people to come on Sundays. One of my favorite stories of like a pastor who really innovated is Deb Burkhalter. She's a pastor of a small church, like 40 people in Wisconsin, Methodist. And when COVID broke out, she's like, listen, I'm just going to go and do On the Porch with Pastor Deb every morning at 7 a.m. and just pray for whoever shows up. You guys know that even now she has about 200 people at 7 a.m. every morning. She's just sitting there with a camera, you know, she's nearing retirement age, but she loves on people and she's messaging them and she's connecting. They've had to add a contemporary service because now people from the community want to come see Pastor Deb on Sundays. But like, she didn't have a smoke machine or even a light ring. She just sat on her front porch and talked about Jesus to people that showed up. And it's having a big impact. So be authentic to who you are. Okay, so who should be on your team? We've talked about teams so we don't burn out. Here are kind of your core folks. You might have one person that could do 2 of these things. Well, I wouldn't have someone doing more than 2 of these things unless they're like a full-time paid staff member, because it can be a lot. So on your team, as you're trying to reach out online or in person, you need someone who's the communicator or the preacher or teacher. You need someone else who's your social media ambassador or influencer, if you want to use younger language, or the inviter, someone that just loves to invite people and doesn't get discouraged when on average they say no 7 times before they say yes. So have that person that's just going to keep inviting, keep sharing your worship service every Sunday on Facebook. Have someone who's your benchmarks or engagement tracker, who's looking at that data saying, oh my gosh, more people are coming online and they're coming at this day and time. Maybe we should have something offered discipleship wise this day and time, because this is when people are looking for it. Have someone doing your tech support. If you're doing online ministry, you know, Paul mentioned trolling, and that's real. You do not want to be Zoom bombed and humiliated or be trolled when you're doing something live on StreamYard or Crowdcast. So have a tech person just kind of sitting there monitoring the feed. Have an encourager. Paul needed a Barnabas, right? You need someone who just looks at you every day and says, you are a gift from God and you rock. We need those people, and it can't be Alexa. So find a human being to do that. And then you want to find a connector or a disciple maker, someone that's really good at asking those 3 questions to 3 other people so that you're not doing it all the time, right? Like someone that's just hardwired to mentor and love on folks. And then a prayer warrior. You need someone who can just commit to wake up every day and pray for all the things and the hard things and the hope-filled things. So it's not all on you. Question?
So I'm gonna jump in. Rachel's got more. I know she does. I've seen her PowerPoint. There's more, but we're about 5 minutes from 8 o'clock, our time, 8 o'clock. And I just want to, again, our goal has been to make this as interactive as possible. Rachel has shared a lot of content, and I'm wondering if there are people that want to jump in now, either on chat or by unmuting, and just ask a question or offer a comment or push back like Rachel has invited.
Well, I think you're full of energy. I wish I had some of your energy. I don't even know if I could do this. And I can't even believe it's almost 8. That's how energized you were. Moving fast. Good job.
Thank you.
I find this very empowering because with all the new that is happening and my sense that I can't keep up with a lot of the changes and things, there seems to be permission here just to be my authentic self, led by the Holy Spirit, guided by the Holy Spirit to enter into relationships and somehow trust that that will happen as ministry and mission. And I thank you for that sense of it's okay to be me.
I just got one question. If you're not tech savvy, how do you where do you go? How do you reach out?
Great question. I would look at your bandwidth and the team that you have around you. If you're not tech savvy, but someone is, and everyone's like, oh, do we have a high school or a college student? Maybe you do, but if you don't, maybe you have someone who's retired who you know they're on Facebook like 20 hours a day because they're posting. Have them learn and take that on. Or if you have a willingness and you're open to it, there's YouTube videos that can help. I actually put so I do have like probably 15 more slides, but I did not intend on covering any of them with you because it was more than feasible and humanly possible and realistic. But on those slides, it lists, one of them has like 16 different platforms you can use for online discipleship. So just Google some of it and Google some and say, okay, how user friendly is this? How affordable is this? Some of those are free platforms and some cost money. So I would say, yeah, just look at your budget. Could I hire someone to do it? Do I actually have an interest in doing it? Could I equip someone in the church to do it? And then what platform would work best? Because we're going to see more of a divide, I think, with Facebook. I know everyone raves about it, but your younger Gen Z folks will not do Facebook at all. So looking at YouTube or TikTok or Discord as ways to communicate with those younger generations is, maybe a good idea too. So. Yes, and I agree with Abigail. Enter into the community through things that you love to do, not just serving. We're hardwired to serve, right? But sometimes it's intimidating to just like hang out with people. But I actually have like Arizona State University students that want to come hang out with me and like cook next week. I'm like, I thought at 40, like my cool days were over, but they're reaching out to me and they're actually using email, which is like amazing for Gen Z kids to actually figure out an email and what that's like. So
I don't know if you realize it, Rachel, but you're still a very cool 40-year-old. So
you say that louder for my children in the other room. No, I'm just kidding.
Also, this event has been brought to you by the New Faith Community team of Upper New York Conference, and we had a number of things in mind when we offered this. One is just to offer a gift to people, anybody that would want to take advantage of the brilliance of these people that you have met. That was our primary purpose. But secondarily, we believe that God is calling. I see it every week. I talk to somebody who wants to talk to me about an idea, something that God has put on their hearts, a group of people they care about in the community they feel called to reach, or an idea they have for a new faith community. So I know God is still calling people. And if these sessions have inspired you and you want to talk about an idea that God seems to be brewing within your heart or in the heart of your team back home, please know that we're here. Abigail and Anna, you have met from our team. There's others on our team that are kind of spread throughout Upper New York that are available to talk to you and to kind of help you to understand kind of what would be the next steps if you feel called to plant a new thing. We're here to walk with you and to provide you with the training and the resources and wisdom that you might need as you get started on that journey. So we're here for you.